That summer, Emily had finally completed her dream backyard, a beautiful in-ground pool, lined with warm-colored tiles, surrounded by lush greenery, and a deck where she could lounge with a book in hand. It was her sanctuary, the one place where she could escape from the stress of her demanding job. But lately, that sanctuary had been invaded. At first, she wasn't sure. A few things seemed off. The pool cover slightly moved, wet footprints near the edge, the faint scent of chlorine in the air even when she hadn't used the pool. Then, one evening, she found a beer can floating in the water. That was the moment she knew someone had been trespassing. She lived alone, her nearest neighbors too far to hear anything unusual. Emily checked her security cameras, but the old system was grainy and useless at night. Frustrated, she decided to set up motion detectors. The next morning, the alert on her phone woke her up at 2:17 a.m. Heart pounding, she checked the footage. There they were, 3 teenagers, laughing as they stripped down to their underwear and dove into her pool like it was a public water park. They weren't just taking a quick dip either. They splashed, did cannonballs, and even lounged on her expensive pool floats. Emily's patience snapped. She wasn't some fragile woman who would just let people walk all over her. She had worked too hard for what she had. She could have called the cops, but no. She wanted them to learn a lesson they wouldn't forget. That day, she went shopping. First, she replaced the pool lights with a set she could control remotely, making them flicker in eerie patterns. Then she bought a waterproof Bluetooth speaker, one she could hide near the pool deck. The final touch? A harmless but utterly disgusting chemical additive that would turn the water blood red when disturbed. Then she waited. That night, they came back. The moment their feet hit the water, Emily activated the lights, flashing red, then blue, then suddenly cutting out. At the same time, the speaker let out a deep, guttural groan, like something ancient waking from the depths. The boys froze. One of them let out a nervous laugh. What the hell was that? Then the water turned dark red. Screaming, they scrambled out of the pool, slipping on the wet deck, one of them nearly tripping over the fence in his rush to escape. Emily watched from her window, barely containing her laughter. They never came back. The next morning, Emily woke up feeling victorious. She stepped outside with her coffee, taking in the sight of her untouched, peaceful pool. No beer cans, no footprints, no signs of trespassing. It was over, or so she thought. Later that afternoon, as she lounged on her deck, scrolling through her phone, a knock sounded at her front door. She wasn't expecting visitors. When she opened it, she found herself face to face with a woman in her late 40s, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Next to her stood a lanky teenage boy, his eyes glued to the ground. "You think you're real funny, don't you?" the woman snapped, jabbing a finger toward Emily's face. Emily frowned. "Excuse me. You scared my son half to death last night." Emily glanced at the boy, recognizing him from the footage. His ears burned red, and he refused to look up. "I scared him?" Emily crossed her arms. "He and his friends broke into my property. Maybe you should be talking to him, not me." The woman's face twisted in anger. "Oh, don't give me that. They're just kids. You could have handled this differently instead of traumatizing them." Emily had dealt with entitled people before, but this was next level. Traumatizing them. "I didn't lay a hand on them. I didn't even call the cops. I just made sure they understood that sneaking into someone's private pool in the middle of the night has consequences." The woman scoffed. "Oh, please. Blood-red water? Demon noises? You knew what you were doing. You probably enjoyed scaring them." Emily smirked. "I did, actually. It was fun." The boy's head shot up, his face filled with panic. His mother, however, only grew angrier. "This isn't over," she spat, before grabbing her son's arm and stomping away. Emily sighed, shaking her head as she shut the door. Some parents would rather blame a stranger than admit their kid did something wrong. That evening, just to be sure, she double-checked her security system and added a new feature, a loud, automated message that would blare the moment someone stepped onto the deck at night. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of it. And she was right. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. A strange tension settled over her, like the air before a storm. She wasn't scared, just annoyed. She had handled the problem. The kids got their scare, and their mother had given her a piece of her mind. That should have been the end of it. But something told her it wasn't. At around 2 a.m., her phone vibrated on the nightstand. The motion detector had been triggered. Emily sat up instantly, grabbing her phone. The live feed from the backyard camera loaded slowly, the darkness making it difficult to see. Then, movement. 3 figures, the same kids. But this time, something was different. They weren't sneaking around or laughing like before. They stood at the edge of the pool, whispering. The boy, whose mother had confronted her, seemed hesitant, but the other 2 were more aggressive, gesturing toward the water like they were daring him. Emily gritted her teeth. They were trying to prove they weren't scared. Idiots. She tapped a button on her phone. The moment the motion detector confirmed their presence, a deep, robotic voice boomed from the hidden speaker. "You were warned." The effect was immediate. The hesitant boy jumped back, but the other 2 didn't move. Instead, one of them pulled something from his pocket, a small, dark object. A rock. Emily barely had time to react before he hurled it at her security camera. The screen went black. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She bolted out of bed, grabbed the flashlight near her door, and stepped onto the back porch. The air was thick with chlorine and damp night breeze. The pool water was still, too still. They were gone. Emily scanned the area with her flashlight. No sign of movement. No sounds of footsteps retreating into the night. Just silence. Then a splash. Her pulse jumped. She turned the beam of light toward the pool. The surface rippled as if something had just disturbed it. But no one was there. Her fingers tightened around the flashlight. Had one of them jumped in? Were they hiding underwater? Slowly, she stepped closer to the edge, peering into the depths. The water was dark, but she could just make out the pool floor. Empty. A chill ran down her spine. If they had jumped in, where were they? Then, behind her, a twig snapped. Emily spun around, light flashing through the trees. She could feel someone watching, and for the first time since this started, she wasn't sure if it was just the kids anymore. Emily's breath caught in her throat. The backyard, usually her peaceful retreat, now felt like something out of a horror movie. The flashlight beam flickered over the trees, the bushes, the fence. Nothing moved. But she knew someone, or something, was there. She tightened her grip on the flashlight. "I know you're out there," she called, her voice steady despite the way her heart pounded. "You want to play games? Fine. But I don't scare easy." Silence. Then another splash. Emily whirled back toward the pool. The water was rippling again, but still no one was in sight. A slow, creeping unease settled over her. The kids had been standing at the edge of the pool before she scared them off. But what if one of them had actually jumped in? What if they never came back out? A ridiculous thought, she told herself. They must have run off after throwing the rock. But still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She took a cautious step closer. The smell of chlorine was thick in the air. The water was dark, the surface smooth again. Then, something brushed against her ankle. She stumbled back with a gasp, her flashlight swinging downward. Nothing was there. Just damp grass. Enough. She was done playing this game. Emily stormed back inside, locking the door behind her. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear, from anger. These little punks thought they could mess with her? Fine. They wanted to push things further. She could push back harder. She grabbed her phone and checked the footage again. The last thing the camera had caught before being hit was the three boys standing at the pool's edge. Then the screen cut out. She frowned. Something was off. One of them had been reaching toward the water, his hand extended, fingers barely skimming the surface. But in that brief moment before the video ended, Emily swore she saw something reaching back. A hand. A dark, shadowy hand curling up from the depths of her pool. Her stomach twisted. That wasn't possible. It had to be a trick of the light, a glitch in the recording. But the uneasy feeling in her chest refused to fade. For the first time since this all started, she wasn't just worried about keeping trespassers out. She was worried about what might already be inside. Emily barely slept that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the footage in her mind. The way the water had rippled. The way the boy's hand had stretched toward it. The shape in the water that didn't belong. By morning, she had convinced herself she was being ridiculous. It was probably just a reflection, a trick of the grainy camera footage. The kids had come back to mess with her, and now they were gone. End of story. Or so she told herself. Still, she couldn't shake the unease clinging to her. When she stepped outside to check the damage, the morning sun should have made everything feel normal again. But as she stood at the edge of her pool, staring down into the still dark water, something felt wrong. The water wasn't as clear as it should have been. Normally, she could see straight to the bottom. Today, it was murky, like something was stirring beneath the surface. Her fingers twitched toward her phone. Maybe she should drain it, get the whole thing cleaned. But that would take time, and she didn't even know what she was looking for. She exhaled sharply. Enough. She grabbed the pool skimmer and shoved it into the water, stirring the depths, waiting for, she didn't even know what. A body, some weird sludge. Nothing. Just silence. She let out a breath. Maybe she really was overthinking this. But as she pulled the skimmer back up, something clung to the mesh. Something dark. Emily frowned and crouched down, inspecting it. It looked like hair. Long, slick strands of black hair, tangled and dripping. Her breath hitched. That's not possible. She lived alone. No one else swam here. The boys had only been messing around. They hadn't actually jumped in, had they? A sick feeling rose in her stomach. She grabbed the skimmer and shook the hair off onto the ground, backing away from it like it might move on its own. Then a sound, a wet, gurgling noise. Emily's whole body went stiff. It came from the pool. Slowly, her eyes lifted, and then something broke the surface. A hand, pale, waterlogged, with bloated fingers stretching toward her. Emily stumbled back with a strangled scream, her heel catching on the deck. She hit the wood hard, her heart slamming against her ribs as she scrambled to her feet. The hand had disappeared. The water was still again, like nothing had happened. But Emily knew what she saw. Something was in her pool. And now it knew she had seen it. Emily backed away from the pool, her breathing ragged, her pulse thundering in her ears. She wanted to tell herself that she was seeing things, that exhaustion, stress, and the paranoia from dealing with those kids had finally gotten to her. But she knew what she saw. That hand, pale, bloated, reaching for her. She grabbed her phone and opened the camera, aiming it at the pool. The water was still again, clear and empty, as if daring her to doubt herself. But when she zoomed in, she could see it, something lurking just beneath the surface. A shadow. No, not a shadow, a shape. Emily's breath caught. Her grip tightened on her phone. This wasn't just some prank. This wasn't the kids. This was something else. And she needed answers. She turned and marched back inside, slamming the door behind her. A quick online search told her what she already knew. There had been no drownings reported in her area, no deaths tied to her property. She had owned this house for 3 years, and before that it was owned by an older couple who never even used the pool. So what the hell was in her water? Then something else hit her. The kids. They had been messing around by the pool when she scared them off. But what if they saw something too? What if that was why they were acting so weird before throwing the rock? Emily hesitated, then pulled up her social media. She knew the name of the kid whose mother had confronted her, Troy Wheeler. Finding him was easy. His account was public, full of dumb selfies and inside jokes with his friends. But one post, made just 3 hours ago, stopped her cold. It was a blurry picture, taken at night. The edge of her pool was just barely visible, but the focus was on something else, something in the water. A face, pale, bloated, with hollow black eyes staring up from the depths. The caption read, "What the hell was in that, pool bro?" A chill ran down Emily's spine. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't imagining things. They saw it too. And whatever it was real. Emily's fingers trembled as she stared at the post. The image wasn't just eerie, it was proof. Proof that she wasn't losing her mind. Proof that something was lurking in her pool. She clicked the comments section. "Bro, that's just the reflection of the lights. Nah, I was there. That was not a reflection. Didn't your mom go off on that lady? LOL. Dude, what if something actually drowned in there? Nuh-uh, that thing was looking at us." Emily swallowed hard. The kids had seen something. And now, looking at the grainy photo, she knew she had seen it too. Her stomach twisted. She had 2 options. Ignore it and hope it went away, unlikely, or figure out what the hell was in her water. And she needed to know. She grabbed her car keys and drove straight to the local records office. If something had happened on her property, there had to be some record of it. The clerk, an older woman with tired eyes, barely glanced up when Emily approached the desk. "I need to see property records for 129 Briar Lane," Emily said, trying to keep her voice even. The woman sighed, typing into her computer. After a few moments, she frowned. "That address hasn't had any major incidents. No fires, no crime reports, no deaths on file." Emily's stomach dropped. "Are you sure? No drownings, no missing persons?" The woman shook her head, then hesitated. "Wait." Emily leaned forward. "What?" The woman's eyes narrowed at the screen. "There was something, but it's old. Way before the pool was even built." She turned the monitor slightly. Back in 1978, there was a well on that property. A girl went missing. They never found her body. Emily's blood ran cold. A well. Right where her pool now stood. Her name? Emily's voice was barely a whisper. The woman scrolled. Rebecca Holloway, 12 years old. Vanished without a trace. Emily gripped the edge of the desk. The shape in the water. the hair she had pulled from the skimmer, the hand that reached for her. It wasn't just a shadow. It was her. And now, after all these years, Rebecca Holloway wasn't just lurking anymore. She was awake. Emily drove home in a daze, her mind racing. Rebecca Holloway, a missing girl, a well that was buried beneath her pool. None of this should have been possible. The pool had been built decades after the disappearance. If there had been anything left of Rebecca, it would have been found during construction, right? Unless she was never buried, unless she was still there. The thought sent an icy chill through Emily's veins. She pulled into her driveway, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles ached. Part of her wanted to get back in the car, drive somewhere, anywhere else. But she needed to know the truth. She grabbed her flashlight and stormed into the backyard, ignoring the heavy weight in her chest. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the water. The pool looked normal, too normal, as if mocking her. Emily swallowed hard and forced herself forward. If there really had been a well here, there had to be some physical evidence beneath the pool. Some clue that would confirm what she feared. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She nearly jumped out of her skin before snatching it up. A message from an unknown number. At first, she thought it was spam. But when she opened it, her stomach dropped. It was another picture of her pool, taken just minutes ago. The water was still, dark, but in the bottom corner of the image there was a blurry shape, a face, hollow black eyes, wet, tangled hair, a mouth that looked like it was trying to form words. Then another text popped up. "Let me out." Emily's breath came in short, sharp gasps. Her fingers trembled as she typed back. "Who is this?" The reply came instantly. "Help me!" Emily stumbled back from the pool, bile rising in her throat. Her backyard, her home, had become something else entirely. Her phone vibrated again. A video. With shaking hands, she pressed play. The camera was shaky, moving in the dark. She recognized the voices, Troy and his friends. "Dude, don't go near it," one of them whispered. "I swear, something's in there." The camera panned to the pool. It was quiet at first, just water. Then movement. A hand, slowly rising from the depths. The boy filming let out a sharp curse. "Go! Go! Go!" The camera jerked as they ran, the video cutting out. Emily's breath hitched. This wasn't just a ghost story. Something was in her pool. And it wasn't going to stay silent anymore. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears as she stared at the screen. The video, the messages, the face in the water. This wasn't just some lingering spirit haunting her pool. Rebecca Holloway wanted out. And she was getting stronger. Emily's first instinct was to run. Pack a bag, get in her car, and drive far, far away from this nightmare. But something in her wouldn't let her. If Rebecca had been trapped down there for decades, how much longer could she be ignored? Emily didn't believe in ghosts. At least, she hadn't before. But this wasn't just a ghost. This was a presence. Something still clinging to this place, still trying to escape after all these years. She took a shaky breath. She needed to end this. But how? Her first thought was to drain the pool. If Rebecca was connected to whatever remained down there, maybe exposing the bottom would free her. Maybe it would break the hold she had on this place, or maybe it would make things worse. Still, Emily had to try. She sprinted to the pump system and turned the valve. The sound of water draining echoed through the yard, the surface lowering inch by inch. As the water receded, the tiles at the bottom became visible, at first smooth and unbroken, but then a crack right in the center. a dark, jagged split running through the concrete. Emily's stomach clenched. She stepped closer, shining her flashlight into the deepening void. The crack wasn't just a crack, it was an opening. The pool had been built directly over the well, and it wasn't empty. A faint, gurgling sound bubbled up from the depths. The air grew thick, heavy, damp. The hair on Emily's arms stood on end. Then, a hand shot up from the darkness. Emily screamed and stumbled backward, barely catching herself before falling into the draining water. The hand, pale, bloated, writhing, clawed at the air, struggling, desperate. Then came a voice, wet, weak, but there. "Please." Emily's breath hitched. "Rebecca." It wasn't rage, it wasn't evil. It was a plea. And for the first time, Emily realized Rebecca wasn't trying to haunt her. She was trying to be saved. Emily's breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. The hand reaching from the darkness wasn't trying to pull her under. It was reaching for help. Rebecca had been trapped for decades, buried beneath the pool, lost, forgotten. And now, Emily was the only one who could set her free. Swallowing her fear, she stepped closer to the pool's edge. The crack in the concrete was widening as the water continued to drain, revealing a deep, black hole beneath. The old well. The air smelled damp and decayed. The tiles around the crack trembled, as if the ground itself was exhaling after years of being sealed. Emily's instincts screamed at her to run, to not get any closer, but she forced herself to move forward. "Rebecca," she whispered. Silence. The hand was gone. The water had drained enough to reveal the bottom of the pool, a deep pit beneath the broken tiles. She had to see. She had to know. Emily grabbed the pool ladder and carefully climbed down, her feet hitting the slick, wet surface. The crack was just a few feet away now. She knelt beside it, shining her flashlight into the hole. The light barely reached the bottom, but there was something there, something pale, something human. Emily's stomach twisted. Bones. A body. Rebecca. A wave of cold air rushed from the opening, chilling her to the bone. And then, a whisper, right behind her. "You found me." Emily spun around, flashlight shaking. She wasn't alone. A figure stood at the pool's edge. A girl. Rebecca. She was drenched, her long black hair plastered to her face. Her skin was pale, almost translucent. Her hollow black eyes fixed on Emily, but she wasn't angry. She wasn't vengeful. She looked tired. Emily's heart pounded. "Rebecca," she whispered, I can help you." Rebecca tilted her head slowly, almost curiously. Then she lifted her arm and pointed, not at Emily, at the bones beneath the crack. She wanted to be brought out. Emily's breath came in shaky gasps. She didn't know how this worked. Would taking the bones out free her spirit? Would it stop whatever had been happening? There was only one way to find out. Emily grabbed the pool net and extended it into the hole, hooking it around the remains. She barely had time to react before the entire ground beneath her trembled. The tiles shattered. The crack split open wider. The hole was collapsing, and it was pulling Emily down with it. She screamed as the floor gave way, her body plunging into the cold, empty void. And the last thing she saw before the darkness swallowed her whole was Rebecca Holloway's outstretched hand. Darkness swallowed Emily whole. For a terrifying moment she felt weightless, her body plunging into the cold abyss below the pool. Dirt and broken tiles collapsed around her, sending up a cloud of dust and decay. Her flashlight tumbled from her grip, its beam flickering wildly before vanishing into the void. Then impact. Emily hit something soft and wet. Mud. Waterlogged earth. The bottom of the forgotten well. Coughing, she pushed herself up, her hands sinking into the muck. The stench of rot filled her nose. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. She wasn't alone down here. She knew she wasn't alone. A noise. A soft, shuffling movement in the darkness. Emily barely had time to react before fingers curled around her wrist. Her breath caught in her throat. Rebecca. The grip was cold, weak, but desperate. Emily gasped and tried to pull away, but then she saw her. Rebecca Holloway. Not just the ghostly figure from before, but the real Rebecca. Her body, half buried in the wet earth, her hollow eyes staring into nothingness. This was where she had been left. Alone. Forgotten. Buried in the dark, Emily's vision blurred with panic, but deep inside she understood. Rebecca had never been trying to haunt her. She had been calling out, begging for someone to find her. Emily's chest tightened. This wasn't right. This girl had spent decades trapped in silence, her story untold, her fate unknown. No one had come for her. No one had helped. Until now. With all her strength, Emily gripped Rebecca's fragile skeletal hand and pulled. A deafening crack echoed through the well. The walls shuddered. The earth groaned, and then light. A sudden, blinding glow burst from above as the last of the pool's water rushed into the well, washing away decades of darkness. The force of it slammed into Emily, but she didn't let go. For the first time in 45 years, Rebecca Holloway's remains were brought into the light. A whisper filled the air. "Thank you." And just like that, Rebecca was gone. The pressure in the air lifted. The heavy weight Emily hadn't even realized was crushing her chest vanished. She gasped, choking on fresh air as hands grabbed her, real hands. Paramedics, police officers. The noise of sirens and shouting voices blurred together as she was pulled from the wreckage, away from the collapsed pool and the uncovered well beneath it. Emily barely processed what happened next. The authorities recovered Rebecca's remains. The story hit the news. A missing girl finally found after decades, buried under what had become Emily's backyard. The town was shaken. The Holloway family, what remained of them, finally had answers. And Emily? She knew she'd never forget the feeling of that cold, desperate hand gripping hers. Rebecca wasn't haunting her anymore. She was finally at peace. Imagine waking up to find something lurking in your own backyard. A shadow in the water, a whisper in the night. Would you investigate, or would you run? Emily faced her fear and uncovered a chilling secret buried for decades. But here's the real question. If this were your house, would you have drained the pool? Would you have tried to free Rebecca, or would you have ignored the signs? Let's be honest, most people would look the other way. But Emily didn't. And because of that, Rebecca finally found peace. Now, it's your turn to decide. Would you have done the same? Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you have done? And if you love creepy, mind-twisting stories like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Your support helps keep these stories coming. Now, go check your pool. You never know what might be lurking beneath.